Hello, students. Here we go. I want to go through this last page of slides, really. It's 4 slides, and we're going to end with Kohlberg, which I think you're probably somewhat familiar with from probably sophomore religion, actually. So we'll go through it pretty quickly. One of those last ones, though, is on gender development. And as we talk about developmental psychology, we really need to talk about how gender starts to show itself and develop as well. Now, know that there's a difference between sex and gender. Sex are the female or the physical characteristics in a male and a female. Those sex characteristics. Gender, however, is both biological, so it's physical, but it's also social. It's probably more of a social construct, how you kind of identify as a male or a female, and sometimes people may not identify as either. So, a couple things to keep in mind. When we talk about sex and gender, remember that we're talking about chromosomes here. And when we talk about at least sex chromosomes, we're talking about 45 of the 46 chromosomes are exactly the same. That last one determines sex. And that's a really important one. You know, fathers give off the X or Y chromosome to determine if it's a girl or a boy. So two X's is going to be a female, an X and a Y is going to be a male. And so that last chromosome is really, really quite important. And it can really make a big difference. I have a list of things here. Some of the differences, of course, these are generalities, but these are some of the differences in gender development. For men, they die earlier. They're more likely to die by suicide. They develop alcohol disorders, more prevalent than women. They're more likely to be diagnosed with autism, ADHD, and color blindness. Men are more likely to commit violent crimes, and men are less likely to interact with face-to-face communication. Women, on the other hand, women enter puberty earlier. They tend to be shorter. They have more fat and less muscle. They smell fainter odors than men do. Women are more vulnerable to depression and anxiety. Women have more relational aggression, which means you're probably not going to take out your aggressions on somebody you don't know. Like, for instance, road rage, you'll pass that on to somebody you do know. And women are more likely to communicate openly. So there's some true differences in gender development. Parents, however, play a very big role and so do peers later on in the gender roles. There's something called gender typing, and it's kind of like what girls do and what boys do. If we think about this, and again, we'll talk about modeling behavior, but if you think about what girls do, well, you know, little girls do this or little boys do this. Well, is that because parents have bought them the toys that little girls play with? Parents have provided opportunities for the little boys to do what little boys do. So putting them in like a karate class or whatever it happens to be. And so parents are very much the first influencers of those gender roles, even when the sex characteristics may be the same or different even. We know that children often model the behavior of others, and we've heard about this before. You know, I have Bobo here in class, but we see that it's peers especially, but then parents. So when they're young, children will model the behavior of their parents. As they get older, children will definitely model the behavior of their peers. In fact, when they're older, they will first model the behavior of their peers, then they will model the behavior of their parents. So that it is important to remember that parents are going to kind of set that example, but later on, a children's friend group will be very, very influential in how they behave, how they react, some of the actions that they take. All right, so let's go on to the last bit. So this is Lawrence Kohlberg, and Lawrence Kohlberg had this understanding of moral development based on reasoning, and it happened through cognition. He said, as you developed in your cognition, your moral development also continued to increase. In fact, it happened in an order. He very much said, Kohlberg very much said, this is very sequential. In fact, first you have to go to this rung on a ladder before you go to this rung. So that sequential order is very important to Kohlberg. You don't just kind of like skip a level, whereas maybe like Erikson, in a way, maybe you could have come back to a level or skipped through a level. For Kohlberg, he says it's not what the person does, like not the action that they take, but why they do it, why they decide to take that action. When we talk about, so here's where Kohlberg kind of came up with his whole development of moral reasoning. It's called Heinz's dilemma. Now, if you've heard about Heinz's dilemma, bear with me, and if you haven't, I want you to kind of think about this, and there's some questions I'd like you to think about. So the idea was Heinz's dilemma, he had a wife who was dying of cancer, but he couldn't afford the drugs to treat her, and these drugs would have treated his wife who was dying of cancer and would have probably saved her life. He goes to the chemist, he goes to the pharmacist and begs the pharmacist, please give me the drugs. He goes and asks him, his family for help. In fact, his family gives him about half of the money that he needs for this medication, but it's not enough. The chemist is not willing to meet him halfway. The doctors aren't going to help. And so one night, Heinz breaks into the pharmacy to get his wife the medication she needs. So is this moral? Is this right? It's not what a person does, but why they do it. So there's some questions that you should think about with Heinz's dilemma. Should he have stolen the drugs? That's the first basic question. Would it change anything if he had not loved his wife? You know, that's a really interesting question. Would have it changed anything if he had not loved his wife? What if that person were a stranger? Would it have made a difference if Heinz had stolen the drugs? And should, like the pharmacist or the chemist, be arrested for murder when the woman dies if she were not to get the medication? Like he's withholding what he knows could save her. So this is where Kohlberg kind of bases his moral reasoning. Okay, really quick, pre-conventional morality. This is what I think you've probably learned about in sophomore religion. Pre-conventional morality is before the age of 9. The biggest reason that Kohlberg says for pre-conventional morality before the age of 9 is you don't want to get caught because you don't want to get in trouble. You're trying to avoid pain and get the reward. And so that's your only real goal or justification, is to avoid pain, get the reward, and not get caught. And that's why you behave in the manner you do. That's why you obey. That's why whatever it happens to be. Conventional morality is now the next stage. This is early adolescence. And conventional morality is more about gaining acceptance. In fact, if you look at that picture right there, the reason why you behave, or the reason why, according to Kohlberg, children take the action they do is because they want to fit in. They don't want to be kind of the one sticking out. They don't want to be censored by authorities. They don't want to get in trouble and then actually have all the attention focused on them. So the reason why you're going to do what you need to do is because you don't want to look foolish, or you don't want to look like you're being called a lot of attention to. And then post-conventional morality. Sometimes it's called principled morality. And this is from adolescence and beyond. And this is the highest level. Remember, according to Kohlberg, it has to happen in sequential order. This is the highest level of morality where you are seeking justice. You're looking to do the things that are not just right, but that are just and truthful and good. You want to achieve an improved society, therefore you will probably take those actions. You might get called out for it, you might lose friends over it, you might even be censored by authorities. And in this case, into adulthood, it might be like legal authorities, but it's because you need to do what's right and just. All right, so let's here's a kind of overview of it. If we look at pre-conventional, it's about your self-interest. About conventional morality, you want to maintain social order. And post-conventional, you reflect the basic belief in rights and self-defined ethical principles. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, of course, for those of you at home, you're going to be working on Erikson's stages. If you are not familiar with those, go back to the notes, and you will be able to kind of go through Erikson's stages on that handout. And if you have any questions, please, of course, don't hesitate to ask. Until we see you again next time. Bye-bye.